kill you.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk, this season G versus Wing, and that means my co-host today is the Balloon Boy. Yeah, not so bad. Not so bad.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty decent read. Bob Skerry, voiceover artist. How are you all doing today?
And I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill. Today's episode will be episode 21 of both Mobile Fighter G Gundam and New Mobile Report Gundam Wing. But before we get into that, Bobo, how's your week been going? It's been a bit of a short week. We're recording early, but anything exciting happen?
Actually, a couple of exciting things have happened. I finally got my payment from the government. So now I am not destitute as I was for the past month and a half. I have been commissioning some art to put into the document for the next phase in my my role-playing game stuff. And I'm also going to be investing some cash into some courses for my voiceover stuff and hopefully try to further connect myself to the voiceover community, as it seems that that's probably the puzzle piece I've been missing in motivating myself to get further into the business. What about you, Skeyhill?
Well, we brought on a producer for my animated film. We has been spending the last few days onboarding her. We're very lucky that she wanted to do this project. It's very weird. It's very unusual. I was worried she might be a little too level-headed for it, but that's exactly what we needed to make sure this one got through. So she's great there. And pretty much the rest of the week is auditions for a pilot I'm shooting in January and kind of helping the short film that's shooting this weekend kind of get ready to go and stay on schedule and on budget. So, you know, not too much on my plate these last few days.
Well, you know, I mean, that's pretty big on both our sides for having been only 4 days since last we spoke.
Yeah, you know, it's just a whirlwind for me probably for the next couple weeks, I think. I might get a small break. At
least the next couple weeks.
I might get a small break next week because of the holiday, but I'm pretty much just going to use that to catch up, I think.
Well, I mean, also have to consider that at the time of recording, 11/18 here, I know at least a number of us on the East Coast are having to apparently go into second lockdown because people haven't been staying in lockdown. So I don't know how it is for you all on the West Coast there right now. But.
Yeah, we're getting pretty much the same thing here.
Is that going to throw off your shooting schedule at all?
It's not going to throw off mine. That's the advantage of working on an animated project. But for some of these other people, I don't know. I think this weekend is definitely going, but for the weekends that come after, we're sort of just up in the air, but I'm preparing in case they do go. So no one's
One last thing before we jump in. I finally saw an example of the LCD screen studios that you've been talking about.
LED screens.
You know what I meant. LED screen.
Yes.
Excusez-moi s'il vous plaît. But yeah, I saw a featurette somewhere about how The Mandalorian has been using that for their sets as of late. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating to see what people can start doing now. Instead of having to necessarily shoot on location, you can make the location and have a perfect sound studio to work out of.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to both, but it does what it more allows for is sort of what my film is doing, and kind of the impossible landscapes are very helpful. The only thing that's sort of bottlenecking it at the moment is it's just so new. I guess it's two fronts. One, the capital still isn't moving there, and part of that is because of the pandemic, and people aren't sure where money's going to be going afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think that will get resolved very quickly. The second one, and the one that's sort of good for me and the crew I'm working with to kind of on board with now, is
Space Jam 2. Yeah.
is the labor. Like, there's just not enough people who know how to do this. So the fact that we're kind of teaching ourselves to do it very early on should put everybody in a pretty good position going forward, especially since I think the technology is just going to become very standard very quickly.
Oh, yeah. I think that you're looking at a good niche for yourself to hone in on for the time being.
Yes, and I forgot to mention, I got to attend the Shanghai Shorts Festival last weekend because of the Hollywood Foreign Press grant. Some pretty good stuff there. Some Hollywood things are creeping into their short films, but mostly the spirit of kind of Europe and Eurasian cinema is alive in their short films. They're okay with just kind of existing and being. One very interesting hybrid documentary that I didn't even know was a documentary for the first 5 minutes of this 10-minute thing. Just very kind of amusing things going on there.
Fascinating. You know what else is fascinating? Learning about some story beats. Do we want to jump in that way?
I think we should. So, Bob, tell us about episode 21 of G Gundam.
Episode 21 of G Gundam. The final battle approaches. Only 3 days away. Or, in Japanese, Kishou Simaru. Time limit 3 nichi mae. You'll notice that time limit is there as a loan word set. So we translated it as 3 days away. But it's, time limit.
Time limit also feels odd, but I get it.
Time limit was fitting for the way that they liked to use English for certain things. And it definitely feels a little less proper for our American English, but it feels good when you really take a second to think about it instead of just spewing out the chirps and caws that we do as people. You know, to be able to hear somebody else use language in a way that isn't just the rote way that we have learned it, lets you really appreciate words. This, again, goes back to a lot of the things I've been saying for this past nearly half a season. Can you believe it?
We're getting close to the halfway point, Bob. I'm excited.
I'm going to keep saying it until we pass the halfway point, and then I'll say we're almost there.
Yeah.
With the finals only 3 days away, the 4 other members of the Shuffle Alliance wait for Domon to finish his training so they can leave for Neo Hong Kong, where the finals will take place. Schwartz then attacks Domon with his Gundam, and Domon experiences a serene state of mind. However, they are interrupted by the Death Army. Domon attempts to call his Gundam, but it is too far away. Rain decides to manually deliver the Shining Gundam, taking control of it herself. Finding who she believes to be Domon, she lowers her guard, only to be ambushed by Master Asia and Death Army soldiers. Domon arrives and boards the Shining Gundam, challenging Master Asia to a fight. However, Schwartz tries to convince him to fight as a team, as his training is not yet complete.
All right, these ones are they're always so long.
There's more story there than you might think on first glance.
All right, in episode 21, we have grief-stricken Katra, Kanashimi no Katoru. I imagine Katoru is Katra. Kanashimi, sort of like grief of grief.
Something to that effect, yes. Remember that no particle in between the two words.
Yeah.
It can act as a descriptor as well as something to be owned.
Yeah.
So grief-stricken Katra or Katra's grief would have also been a sufficient transliteration.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking might be going on there. All right. Here, though, Hiro and Troa confront Zex for the first time since their battle in Antarctica. Zex surrenders willingly. Unwilling to compromise with Oz's ideals, Katra's pacifist father evacuates their colony and sacrifices himself to destroy it before Oz can take advantage of it. Episode 21 of G Gundam. My favorite part is probably the Carrot is back, just sort of throwing his weight around to Mass Guy and Father Guy, giving us some exposition. And then we go into all of the Gundams that other nations have, some of which we've seen before, taking, I don't know, to me it feels like the most absurd way to get to where the finals are happening. Why don't any of these countries give them ships to transport these things? Why do they all have to go by land?
Spectacle.
It's just not.
I'm sorry. Are we supposed to believe that it is not easier to just go in your bull-headed Gundam from Neo Spain as the Matador Gundam? No, it's not easier, but it looks good for the whole 20 seconds that we hold on it.
Yeah, it does look good. And I'm just imagining, all right, so he's traveling from Spain to China in 3 days on foot. Gotcha.
In a giant robot. I mean,
They're
it's
not
probably
that.
moving
They're
about
like
as
40
fast as a
feet
car.
long. You know, it's not happening in 3 days. I'm just saying. And the Zeus, right, is riding alongside of a train, and the Grizzly Gundam, for some reason, is just jumping off a cliff, gonna swim over to China, I guess.
It's skiing.
It was skiing?
It was skiing down a slalom slope.
Oh,
and that's why we see him like rushing down, and then we see it up in the air like that. Because skiing was popular back in the 90s.
Meanwhile, the Windmill Gundam was just chilling, blending in with the other windmills for fun.
Thanks, Neo Holland.
Yes. In America, they called it the Hurricane Gundam. Is that what it's called in Japan?
I don't think so. I'm gonna pull it up, but I think it is literally just called the Windmill Gundam. The Nether Gundam.
The Nether Gundam. Well, that sounds like a very devious, devilish Gundam now.
Well, considering it comes from the Netherlands.
Yeah, I'm glad they changed that one.
Well, yeah, because hey, look, we represent the entirety of the Netherlands. I don't have Heidi hair, so I have to be a windmill.
That's all. I just.
You love it.
I know. This is the sequence that always stood out to me, and I don't know why, but I was expecting it in the first episode. I don't know why I assumed that's where it began or why my memories jumbled it that way.
No, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
There's a fourth one, or another one that I feel like we're missing here, because I know we have Zeus Gundam, we have Nether Gundam, we have Matador Gundam, and we have Lumber Gundam. Wasn't there another one among these that I might be forgetting?
If they're
the Viking Gundam.
Oh yes, rowing. He's rowing a boat. They made a boat that for a Gundam to use instead of putting him on a plane.
Listen, this is like mascot stuff. Like it's like going to a parade or going through. It's a Small World after all, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing everybody make a pastiche of their culture from the view of Japanese writers. So, of course, the people from Norway are going to send over their Viking Gundam. And of course, their Viking Gundam isn't going to be some big, sweaty guy with a shield and an axe. It's going to be some dude with horns on his head with literally another ship for his pauldrons while riding another ship that may or may not be mechanically attached to its legs.
Yeah, and so that Norse Gundam better be hoping that global warming has devastated the Arctic Circle, because that's the only way he's going to be able to row to China.
Well,
Hong Kong, yeah. Chibity has a moment where maybe you picked up on this. He sounds like Jan Brady. He goes like, domo, domo, domo.
I did the bit. Domo, domo, domo.
Which I enjoyed awful. There. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Also, my wife thought at one point that he said Shine or something, but it didn't really work in the situation. I'm 98% sure he says shit in the Japanese.
Yeah. There was no overt cursing over here. Shine is the word for shit?
No. Shine is bastard or something like that. But it doesn't sound like there's the N sound at the end of when he says it during, I think it's the escape from the first portion of the Death Army.
Yeah.
It sounds like he just goes, shit! Because it's supposed to be him doing the occasional throwing in of English.
Okay.
Because that's like his bit.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, but I know that they were not as oppressive about curse words from another language in Japan at the time.
Sure.
So to drop an F-bomb or shit or something like that is not a big deal over there.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. That sounds good.
But yeah. Other than Chibity having a real Brady Christmas moment, what else stood out to you?
Can I just a quick sidetrack? Do you know there was a Brady Bunch movie where Mike Brady becomes the president of the United States? Yeah,
I'm sorry. I just had a moment.
Yeah, I won't talk about it too much on air, but that
No, I'm curious. Yeah. We're taking time.
Yeah, he accidentally runs for president, and like there's an election error that makes him the president. He didn't win very close at all. It's not that different from like that Robin Williams movie, where like
what was that?
Like Man of the
State or something?
Man of the Year, I think.
Yeah.
Where like an electoral error court kind of puts this guy nobody thought would win into the White House.
Let's not forget Swain State.
Yeah.
From the late aughts, starring Kevin Costner. Burn in hell.
So, and then, he does whatever. And everybody in America's wooed by his 70s, low key charm and like wise dad voice. But ultimately, when he realizes he's not supposed to be president, the lesson he has to teach his children is like, well, it's not right. I wasn't elected president, so we got to stand down. That's kind of the movie. The Brady Bunch moves into the White House. I forget what the movie's called, but it's quite ridiculous.
I hope that shows up on air real soon for no reason.
Domon has gone off to hide and meditate. All of his friends stuck around, but they send kind of their crew to go off ahead of them. Except for, green-haired lady. She has to stay, make sure this guy's doing his thing, which is great because I'm fine. I like more green-haired lady in my life. So that's good for me.
Natasha is interesting in this episode because, again, I'm going to push that she's some sort of a tsundere type.
Yeah.
Where she is acting like she has no care about what Argo is to her. And anytime that he's willing to stand up, she just gets in a huff, but doesn't necessarily threaten to actually set off the bomb.
Rain is working on the Gundam, so Domon doesn't have his Gundam when he's challenged to a fight by German guy. But at that moment, as you said, the Dark Army comes after sort of taking a little bit of a break. Rain asleep in the Gundam, and unfortunately the alarm is too much of a soothing sound to wake her up.
Apparently. I was so bent out of shape about that watching. Girl, you've been laying there from a dead sleep.
Yeah.
And you have this thing going on around you. You're in the middle of the wilderness. It's not like your body's adapted to city sounds over these past 2 weeks that Domon's been gone.
Yeah.
Your ass should hear that.
Yeah. And, she transforms again, still sexualized. Fine. But what I noticed this time around is like when everybody else transforms, like their feet are regular. But when she transforms, she has high heels. Is that because she's wearing them and it just kind of goes over them? Is she wearing high heels?
That is the way that you would have to try to make that work.
Yeah.
Because, she does wear heels. She doesn't wear flats. Because what kind of technician is going to wear flats?
Why would they wear sensible shoes in the jungle, Bob? I know.
So, I would say that it's probably just the nano suit stuff going over her that goes around her heel.
When the American Gundam transformed, did he take off his Gundam shirt? Did that happen?
So, okay, here's the thing. That has always happened. The thing that was weird that might have made you notice it is they do the proper transformation sequence, even though they do it in the middle of him already declaring his special attack.
Yeah.
And they show the cut of him losing his armor thing, effectively his shirt, to show his robo pecs and ass. But the thing that made you notice it is that in the next shot after the transformation, he doesn't have the shoulder pads because of having the fists, but somehow still has the center part over his chest because I think one of the animators just goofed.
Yeah, I just imagine the transformation is done by a different part of the staff and the memo didn't get across. It definitely went back.
I mean, this is still back in the early 90s where we're still having like color correction issues and people misdrawing things and just you're on a deadline. You have to get it out. Yeah,
no complaints for me. I just like the image of this Gundam putting on boxing gloves, taking off his shirt and having Gundam abs.
I know that you don't care. I'm saying this for any of our younger listeners here who might be getting into Gundam for the first time and might not be privy to how in the 80s and 90s it was not uncommon for people to misread a cue, and so Leonardo suddenly has Raphael's voice for half a second while having Donatello's eye mask color and suddenly turning a lighter shade of green than he should be. That was completely common back in the day, and you just went with it.
Yeah. And
Old man.
So Delmon has
Velvet Cloud.
Delmon has this fight with German guy, and I guess the lesson he has to learn is to like get out of his head and sort of be in the moment, right? This very Eastern kind of meditation thing.
Yeah.
And I guess he's doing that because he's so afraid of his life. He has to be reactionary. Is that my take? Is that what I'm supposed to take away?
Kind of, yeah. So the way they did it was very big, but what you're getting is what they're trying to send over to you. It's when you are in the moments of just prior to death, you have that serene moment. I'm going to give you a very quick anecdote.
Yeah.
When I was still living out in the Boston area a few years back, my wife and I were driving from a friend's place after playing some D&D. And there wasn't a whole lot of snow on the ground, but there was enough that it caused my car to go in a 720 spin. Maybe even a 1080 spin. So we spin, and rather than lose our shit like you would see in a movie, generally a comedic movie, we both went from being in a emotional place where we were conversing while still paying attention to the road to just completely calm and still. And that's what allowed me to slow, keep an eye on the road, and reset ourselves to keep on going. And that just washed over us for a good 30 seconds after we had straightened ourselves out. And then we were back into, oh God, our thinking brains caught up to us. Fuck. So it is not an unreasonable thing to think that in your last moments before dying, you have a fight or flight third option, which is to face it head on. You know, not necessarily in anger, like a fight response tends to elicit, or a flight, which is generally a fear-based response that you would take under mind. You're going to focus and react, right? You're going to make a serene state of mind decision in the moment, and with luck and skill, you should be able to survive. They took it to the nth degree here by saying, okay, now this sword is somehow going to hold back this giant machine's, I would assume, if not heavy and blunted, at a razor sharp blade against your shitty rusted one. So, yeah, it's over the top, but it gets the sense across of what they're trying to say here.
Yeah, and it sort of reminds me of, a David Foster Wallace essay that he did where he, for some reason, was really interested in sports memoirs.
Really?
And, yeah. And so he would read them, but he would always trying to figure out well, how did they do it? How is Michael Jordan and Anna Kournikova, how are these guys so great? And then he would read it, and he'd always buy into the promise and this is going to be the time I do it. And then he'd read it and he felt like he got nothing out of it. And the realization he came to was well, they're this great because it just happens. They couldn't put it into words. They didn't have to learn it. It's just sort of there instinctually in them. There's no way for them to put that into words. So of course that's how it would go. The less time they have to think, the quicker, the faster, the more reactive they can be. I have a hard time being scared by the giant Gundam heads on snake noodles. And I know I know they want me to be, but I'm not feeling it.
It's a Hydra.
Yeah, but the Gundam head makes it look. I'd rather it be I don't know, the China Gundam's hands or something. The big Gundam with the big crest. It just feels a little silly to me.
If memory serves, I feel like next episode we see what the head actually does. It's not going to remain just a static head where it's oh, hey, I just did a kit bash of this one toy and just put a bunch of my extra Gundam head bits on top of the tentacles. Hooray.
Yeah.
If I remember, each of those heads looks like a Gundam, but then should have a very monstrous maw hidden underneath the head part. So it's not that the head should look as humanoid. The humanoid head is going to further deform. And that's what you're going to be seeing is something that is not right, or what we have always associated the Gundam to be, a robotic stand-in for a human. That robotic human is now going into a more organic place and a more dark silhouette of itself. I mean, if you look at the design for all of the Death Army variants, they're all based on Oni. That's why they are shaped the way they are. Besides having like the single eye thing going on with it being all bloodshot and everything, it has a crest on top of its head that looks like a horn, a singular horn, and their guns double as clubs, and those clubs look very similar to the kind that are often depicted as being in Oni hands. So we're definitely getting some of the mysticism and mythology aspect going to this. They are numerous and coming from a singular source, this Enma-style source, our devil or dark Gundam. So, we're getting a lot of these organic visuals from the baddie, and we have to see what that's going to do for us as time goes on.
Yeah, it's probably best to hold off on a lot of things since we do end on a cliffhanger, essentially. So our story really isn't done yet. Maybe it'll wrap up next episode. But what you get the start of here is essentially, I guess, what the natural end of this kind of story cycle of Domon reintegrating with each of these people in the aftermath of their encounter, and they're becoming the Shuffle Alliance. Their crests hurting when Domo's hurt because of magic of some sort. So they're realizing that they are linked, aside from kind of the bond they just formed in the last 3 episodes. So it makes sense that, you know, they'll kind of defeat that here at the high point of their story. They'll be a cohesive unit, and then they'll kind of bring us into the second half that way. All sort of works for me.
Yeah, no, that vibes with me too. Now let's get into Gundam Wing.
Yeah.
So with Katra, it was interesting because I'm going to focus more on him than on the other 3 pilots. We'll touch base, but it was interesting to see Katra being this very relatable character this episode. He's panicking because he thinks he's about to be taken in, and he is so concerned with doing his part for what he believes to be a team, even if the rest of them don't really act as though they're on a team. He finds out well after the fact that he has a sister that just... There are some moments where it's bizarre that it just bomb drops, and then we're suddenly supposed to treat it like they've been brother and sister for life. How do you not know you have an older sister? That sort of thing. But we know Dad, so I don't know why Dad never told him about your sisters. Multiple. Dad, Mr. Winner there, is very rash.
Yeah.
What is your take on his philosophies?
Well, first, let's talk about the sibling thing. Because, yeah, it always annoys me that we don't know, or that Katra doesn't know his sister, and that for some reason his sister doesn't want to tell him. But the backstory here is that they didn't give us, so you're justified in your confusion and my annoyance, is that Katra actually has like 50 sisters. And they're all much older than he is. And they're all born in tubes because in space, it is really hard on the human body to have a natural birth. So they made these daughters. They're all stationed on all the resource satellites the Winner family owns. They're the Rockefellers of space, essentially. And then his father and mother really wanted to have an actual child. And so they conceive the child. This child is Katra, but Katra's mother dies during the childbirth. And that puts a lot of strain between the father and the son, as the father sort of blames Katra for his wife dying. This leads Katra to look to Instructor H as like a mentor father figure kind of person. And that's how he gets hooked up with the Sandrock Gundam. And yes, but you see, and like I sort of alluded to in earlier episodes, Catra actually sort of like a spoiled kind of brat person before he goes to Earth, and it kind of chills him out. And you see a little bit of that kind of rash, kind of, annoyed mentality as he's kind of arguing with his father. And it feels like this very domestic dispute, despite the grandness of the scale they've been fighting on since then.
Yeah.
So there's some info for you, some background stuff there.
That does help. And I appreciate you telling me about the numerous children of men situation. But yeah, no, I will also note that there was a really weird moment between Catra and his sister where, like, it's supposed to be this very close moment of them connecting, but it's, even in the Japanese, it feels like one of those things where America should call them cousins with how close they got in that moment.
Yeah. I could see that reading of that. Maybe I'm desensitized to it, or I saw it early enough where I wouldn't have kind of picked up or thought that.
It's just, it's the mood, it's the tension, it's whatever the very mild score, if there's even a score there in the moment. It definitely reads differently than what may have been intended in the moment.
Yeah, I can't sort of tell there. It's the whole thing with the sister, both beginning and end, is, another example of me liking how we get to certain places, but not liking how we get there. But I think part of it is, you're seeing this. We're going to get a lot of episodes like this where the first half is like a thing and the second half is a different thing. Instead of kind of an intersection or one being less big than the other, less weighted. And part of that is, like I'm saying, this overstuffed narrative we kind of have here. That's why there's all these backup mangas. This is an episode I would sort of like to have be its own thing. I think they might have felt the need to put in the first half because they needed a Gundam. You needed your obligatory Gundam battle, which is a shame because earlier series didn't have to resort to that, and later series kind of get back to that. There isn't the necessity to solve all problems with Gundams, and so it would have been nice to have this kind of quiet little domestic spat with Catra and his family, because it's such a weird family dynamic that they do have, and it's weird. Like, what your original question was, a weird kind of philosophy and the weird tactics that this father takes to do what he thinks is right versus what the colonies think are right.
Yeah, so it's interesting because it seems like everybody respects the Winter family until there's the most minor level of dissent, and then suddenly there's riots in the streets, and Mr. Winter goes from trying to just speak his piece plainly, clearly, because he's a pacifist, to, I'm going to take my resources and I'm going home. And then just gets shot down. He knows he's actively allowing himself to die and that they're going to take the resource station back anyway. But he's like, no, I'm doing this because visuals and son, feel bad and do like dad does and commit suicide.
Yeah, I actually, on one hand, for TV, I think probably it does move a little quickly. Again, you'd have a full episode here, it'd be nice. But I like what that quickness kind of offers is something TV sort of tends to shy away from that I think is very impactful, and what the show has done with a few characters now, is it adds a lot of ambiguity. It'd be really easy to look at, to do this story and have it be kind of one-sided. But, in this scenario, Oz comes off a lot more rational than Catra's father does.
Yeah.
And it forces the show to have to go into over-explanation as Catra and his sister are talking, running from the crowd, talking about like, oh, our dad's a nice Monopoly guy. He does own all the just about 80% of the resources in space, but he's really generous with them.
Give it away for practically nothing.
Yeah, I know. And I like reading that as being like, well, of course they would think that. Like, they're his children. Like, even if it's not true, like, how, I don't know, they'd be biased sort of in their views of it.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree with that.
And so, like, that is interesting to me, that it's not like, oh, here's your benevolent dictator guy. Like the people are sort of taking something that is kind of easy for a lot of people to usually get behind. Like, oh, let's have the resources be community owned instead of in the hands of one very powerful person. But now in this particular scenario, they're sort of the bad guy. And now we have to be like, oh, this is a sort of a sticky situation here because we don't like one, but the other side's not getting painted well either. And I like that we kind of have to struggle between those two things because I think that's sort of how a lot of situations are.
I do get where you're coming from, and I'm not saying that there's always going to be a white hat and a black hat in any given argument, but it's definitely a difficult thing to accept because it seems like there are other ways to go about it, but we are definitely looking at two of the most towards the center gray points with no opportunity to try and attempt to go towards either side of the spectrum directly. At the beginning of this series, it definitely felt very clear, a very dark gray over here, a very light gray over here. And now it's just all pushing towards the center, and whether or not it feels real, I can't quite say right now. To me, it feels less like real and more like the same kind of generated tension, but with no release yet. So I can't really weigh in on it to say.
Correct. There is no. I mean, that's sort of part of the serialization process. There is no release, but also, I don't know, it's kind of I don't know. When Americans, we think of cinematic, it's sort of like big images, what we think of as immersive, which usually means kind of a realistic kind of view of sound, and lack of flashy camera moves and lighting and things like that. But for the rest of the world, cinematic is sort of just like quiet, non-judgmental viewing of things, almost documentarian with occasional peeks in, so that we're sort of just forced to be around this character and make our own attachment to it based on our own experiences. And so why the Gundam Wing show, for all the cartoony things that it does do and all the 90s things that it does and anime things that it does that kind of throw me off a little bit, what I like is that it's up until the very end of the show, it wants to have this very muddled view of this kind of world, or I guess an Earth sphere in turmoil, and these characters trying to do what's right, even though the rest of the world doesn't really want them to do it anymore. That is where the tension is for me, and watching them kind of go through a little bit of these soap operas in the process.
So, going over to seeing the Mercurius and the
V8,
thank you. It was interesting that we decided to do something that we've seen happen time and again. Hey, let's lock up this kid, but he's a really good Gundam pilot, so maybe we'll just put him in the big machine that can cause a lot of damage. I'll keep an eye on him. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fair to sort of judge Lady Un's belief in it, especially when Nickel sounds like the more practical and pragmatic person in that argument, based on the information that we have so far. But just kind of, I don't know, keep it in mind. Like I think what we're starting to see here is Lady Un gain a respect for these pilots that we saw Trey's gain after his duel with Wu Fei. And you're not going to see where that leads to yet, but you are perfectly fine and well-deserved in kind of viewing it as a stupid thing for a villain to do at this point in time.
It's not a matter of it being stupid. I think it's just the fact that we've seen it happen more than once is what kind of bothers me. That let's lock this kid up, but then let's let him go so that way we can run a test or something to the effect. I do think it's interesting that Lady Un is giving so much preference to our prodigal student here in Troa.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting to see that, oh, hey, we have these almost Gundam mobile suits.
Yep.
Let's give it to this kid who came out of nowhere and is blowing our socks off, but is still brand new to us. We know hide nor hair of him. And he's saying that we should take the pilot of the shield while you have the gun that we just saw was able to protect from being able to take the heat from your gun and put him in that one.
Well, they already sort of mentioned that the scientists mentioned that the one who was the better pilot would win. And you probably wouldn't guess this from what the show's shown so far, but Troa is technically better than Hiro at piloting mobile suits.
Yeah, technically speaking, I agree.
And they also have, the self-destruct system activated by Troa's command.
Yeah, supposedly. That could also be another bluff by the professors at large there that Troa may or may not acknowledge, because I have not taken any part of this as being that Troa is actually doing stuff for Oz as much as doing an infiltration mission.
Yeah, and we sort of, if you were confused, he sort of lets the cat out of the bag when he's like, stop destroying the mobile dolls, I'll have to blow you up, Hiro.
Yeah, exactly. I did like that moment.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? I get what you're doing, and I'm totally here for it. I'm going to kill them when we get to it.
Yeah.
Chill out.
Yeah, Hiro, we got a plan, don't worry. It's okay. Wait till we get there.
Yeah, and to see what is supposed to be the most level-headed of the bunch with Hiro turn into like this impetuous child in front of Troa. It was an interesting little dynamic shift, and also I thought it was a great moment when we finally see our Milliard Peacecraft come out of the Tall Geese and introduce himself as such in a way that felt more like he would be. This moment, had we seen it at the beginning of the series, would have made us believe that he was the protagonist versus these two kids. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how we can shift perspective with the right sign, the right little marker for everybody to go along with.
Yeah, and this is the muddling I'm talking about that I like. It goes to the, Catcher's father says sort of a theme when he's blowing himself up, which is there is no end to this fight. And, the battle lines just change, the sides change, the combatants change, but it just goes on and on and on. And we're seeing bits of that already. When the show began, the Alliance were our bad guys. And then it was Oz with Treize and Zex, and then Zex had sort of aligned with the Gundams a little bit when he says glory to the colonies, but now Oz and the colonies are working together, and Treize is sort of answering to Romerfeller. Like, it's just sort of this constant, space doesn't want to fight with the Earth anymore. Like, it's just sort of this constantly evolving thing. And so I like that sometimes these people that look like heroes won't anymore, and these people who look like villains will. And that's part of this non-judgmental, more neutral approach to the story that I think is deserved by the complicated beats that we're going to take as the show progresses. Okay, fair.
Now, is that why you prefer this one over some of the others that we've discussed off air? Is that the storytelling seems to take a very neutral, no one's particularly good or bad in this war scenario situation?
Gundam generally itself is very good at it. What I think and it's tough to say what my preference is to this compared to the other ones, because I've just watched it so much earlier in life, and it does have so much of has much more DNA in myself because of how early I watched it and how often I've watched it. So it's really hard for me to try to judge it evenly with the other ones. But, what I've come to now is if I watched this show at the same time for the first time as I watched all the other ones, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much. And what would have made it watchable is sort of that approach to its storytelling and some of the complexities there. But I almost wonder if after watched all those UC shows going into this one, if I would have kind of paid it enough attention to notice these things.
That's fair. I mean, I play a number of role-playing games with you, and I have read a number of your scripts. So that's why I ask, how much of this has influenced your perspective on disputes in writing?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a genuine question that I'm asking. It's not just a rhetorical, if you had to look back at your writing up to this point, would you say that this had, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the greatest and 1 having the least, would you say that this had a fair amount of influence on your take to writing disputes, arguments, and conflict?
Yeah, so, when I write movies versus when you write TV, you have to sort of approach them differently, not for the obvious reasons, but like in TV, you have to have your heroes and villains. Your stories are just too long to not have that hook to sustain you week after week. Films, I try to avoid it more. I'm less interested in winners and losers in general, and in people, overcoming other people. It's not interesting to me, and I don't fully believe it. But in TV, you sort of need that. So if I'm going to do that, I'm more interested in like why this happened, what led, it's not that different from Antigone. They always say tragedy is when sort of both people are right. And like, that's kind of what's going on, I guess, in the shows that I like, is that I get where both people are coming from. Nobody's twisting a mustache. They're both trying to do what they think is right. And that's what I like exploring. Like, why are they in conflict? And then you have to let it play out so that your audience feels satisfied. But that's sort of the least interesting part to me. So,
and this is the last thing I'm going to say before we get back to talking about giant robots in space.
Yeah.
Would you say then that you are not a fan of the monomyth?
No. I mean, listen, it's good. If you're a writer out there, learn it. Learn your monomyth. When you get stuck, when you get confused, you can fall back on it. It's there. It's a useful tool. I still use it to kind of outline things, but it's no longer doing it so, minutely. Like it's no longer, you can be a lot more creative in what overcoming means, and what an antagonist could look like, and in what antagonism itself is. So I think it's a perfectly fine tool in the arsenal, but I think, especially in America, we rely on it so much. And for a person and just aside from philosophical views, just the amount of media that I've consumed in my life, it all just looks the same to me at a certain point. So I just get bored very easily. I need some more personality. I need some more things trying something new. And what I think that Gundam Wing is doing that I like, whether or not it's always successful at it is a different matter, is it sort of knows you're coming in with an expectation. It knows it was billed as like a remake of the UC timeline and kind of a throwback to what you liked about Gundam. And it's playing off of those expectations. And then using that to kind of make you keep guessing and make you keep going along. And that's what I like about it.
So is there anything else you want to talk about on Wayne, or do we want to go the way we go?
Yeah, I think we can go off. Where did you, what was the way you went this week, Bob?
Well, based on these 2 episodes, I definitely had to ask myself, if I were to build a Gundam from scratch, now whether that means build a model in kit bash or build a giant mechanical being from scratch, what would my design be? I have to ask myself, in a world closer to build fighters, or in a world where we get to work with a instructor H or a Professor J or what have you, Dr. J, excuse me, what would be the specs that I would lean into? What would be my design motif? I've always been interested in that concept and conceit, the personalization of the thing that you admire, right?
Yep.
So I find I have a slight difficulty figuring what I would want my suit to specialize in, but have you ever thought of that, Skeyhill?
I sure have, Bob, but I can't go into it because that suit actually exists in this show.
Really?
Yes, and not only that, the maker of it will explain, what about its design, what went behind its design philosophy and then you'll know what draws me to it so explicitly.
Interesting. Okay, because at the very least, I know that I would absolutely prefer the machinations of a mobile fighter suit over your standardized piloting of almost any other suit in the Gundam universe.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of having a suit that is able to move based on one's own limber nature, their direct response. It's the same reason why I liked the idea of what do they call it in Pacific Rim?
Yeah,
the sync, the flow state, something like that.
Yeah, some magic thing.
Well, it wasn't magic. It was. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they did a great job of meeting a lot of the Japanese tropes that would be applied to a big robot series.
Certainly.
They took technology that was meant to replicate the abilities of the bad guys. That's very Kamen Rider and otherwise. They used those abilities to try and be able to act on behalf of humanity, and they had to find a perfect partner in order to be able to have what should be a very lackluster suit rise above expectation.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always enjoyed that sort of thing. Now, whether that's having martial prowess or whatever, I don't care. But I have to wonder, like, what's my color scheme? Am I going to go with your standard red, white, blue, yellow, or am I going to go off the beaten path? Am I going to do it based off of an OC of mine, or am I going to have something that is more standard unit? So that's just a fun thought experiment that I'm going to progress on over time, and I would love it if our listeners did the same and maybe let us know about it by going to
Zaku Talk cast at gmail.com. Great.
That's
great
the one.
idea there, Bob. Yeah, I would fully believe you to be a more traditional approach to Gundam with a more traditional kind of color scheme.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit smaller than the other Gundams to give you this sort of underdog nature you kind of root for. With maybe like you transform into like a bigger thing or something, kind of like what the unicorn does.
So I haven't gotten to see Unicorn yet, but I will say that the Banshee from that series has always been interesting to me.
Ooh, I love me some Banshee. Mm-hmm.
I like that antler design, as you can tell by the picture behind me on our Zoom.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even put that together. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've thought about possibly picking up a Banshee down the line just to do a recolor on it.
Yeah, big fan of the Banshee. It's got a cool little claw thing too. For listeners out there, I don't recommend watching Unicorn without watching the UC stuff that precedes it in the timeline, which is essentially Gundam, Zeta Gundam, Double Zeta Gundam, and Char's Counterattack, as the UC sort of wraps up those four stories very nicely. And you'll miss out on a lot of what makes Unicorn work. It's probably one of my favorite Gundams in the top 3, but I can never really recommend it to anybody to start off with because you need to watch so much to fully enjoy it.
Well, that's fair. So would you say that by the end of watching this series, this pair of series together, that I should jump into Unicorn?
No, that's exactly what I'm not saying, Bob.
No, but what I'm saying is, how much more would you say? Do I have to devour everything from Mobile Suit Gundam through Double Zeta and everything? Or can I get by on watching and picking and choosing certain series?
No, I mean, you only have to watch the 3 series I mentioned in the one movie. Those first 3 Gundam series, and then Char's Counterattack, the movie. That was supposed to kind of tie it up, but left a lot of questions open. And then Unicorn takes place a few years after Char's Counterattack in the timeline, despite it coming out 20 years later.
Okay, so I'll have to keep that in mind. I'm probably going to completely disregard what you just said. Go and watch it anyway because I'm a man of aesthetics.
I would rather you watch other Gundam shows than Unicorn, like other standalone Gundam series that you don't have to, that are in their own timelines.
So, Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Yes, although I don't think you.
Sure, that's also much.
I don't know if you'd like that one.
They're more melee.
Yeah, I don't know if that type of storytelling. I don't know how much you'll like it. based on what you've told me during these recordings, what you like from your shows and why you haven't gone to Gundam earlier. Maybe
I know that it is a war-based thing, but really it's less to do about conflict in that regard as much as if one is going to put themselves on the line, they should not be doing it from afar with guns and with all these like super far ranged attacks. If you're going to kill someone, I expect you to do it to their face. I want you to realize the meaningless nature of killing if you're going to go through and carry that burden with you instead of just hitting the kill button, so to speak.
Yeah, it's not as big in Iron-Blooded Orphans as you may think, despite what the main Gundam looks like. That's not sort of a big factor in it, at least from a mobile suit perspective. There are a lot of interesting things in Iron-Blooded Orphans. I like it a lot. I would recommend something like Age for you, maybe Gundam 00. I think those are a lot more up your alley.
I definitely saw. I watched the Crunchyroll Gundam timeline video. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I don't think I've seen it. It's on Crunchyroll.
Well, it is sponsored by Crunchyroll. It is from that company, but it is on YouTube.
Oh, then I have seen it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So I watched that around the time that we started doing this podcast, and Age definitely stood out to me. As has the Build Fighters Try, and Build Divers.
Yeah, I guess I didn't bring them up just because, like G Gundam, they're sort of off of your normal Gundam canon metaverse sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, I know you like them, but like if you're asking me about Gundam shows to watch, I don't think of those in there.
Okay, I see where you're coming from now. Yeah. You're saying like if I want to watch something that is more indicative of Gundam as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will definitely keep that in mind then. What about you? What were you thinking about as you watched these episodes?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of did discuss it here when we sort of talked about kind of America cinema versus world cinema and sort of just cinema in general versus television and what the two different mediums can do. And like a lot of people, you know, watching The Sopranos and watching Breaking Bad and Mad Men and being like, aha, TV's gotten more cinematic. But like I lamented earlier, it's just sort of like bigger visuals, technically more interesting character designs, but there's still a great deal of broadness in a lot of this. There's a great deal of like judgment, you know, like this is how you should feel in this moment. That's just sort of something that we've been doing. And it's not like it's not necessarily bad, because there's a reason why our cinema is sort of the most popular in the world, or why it travels so well, why it makes so much money. But what they do in Europe and in Asia that we don't really do here very much is they're also okay with watching other things. And we sort of just have the one way to do things. And I'm just sort of bored of it. You know, we've been there, we've done it. What else is out there? So that's me there.
Well, I mean, I know that you're the type of person that is going to continue to explore until you find your answer. And it may not be until you are truly the alive skeleton that you've told me you are, but I know you'll get there.
All right. So ready to go take a walk over to the nerd corner?
No, I got to put on my shoes. Hold on.
All right. What my nerd corner is particularly nerdy this week. Though not in the fun, socially acceptable way. You know, my favorite composer, Philip Glass, has written an opera called Les Enfants Terribles. It's sort of based off of an old book, which has also been adapted into numerous movies and whatnot. His opera, very interesting sounding. Well, this duet from France, Katja and Marielle Lebec, sort of classically trained musicians, have been allowed to adapt it by Philip Glass for a new CD. It's a bit tricky to get to, as mostly you have to kind of get it shipped from France, but it sounds very wonderful. None of the singers are in there, so it's just the pure music on a piano and a cello. So, you know, for that very small portion of our audience that would be into that, that's out there. I'll put that link in the show notes.
Well, I'm going to just add a little extra tag to that for you.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite one-act play authors goes by. Oh, geez. Of course, as I bring him up, I lose his name. All in the Timing by. Of course, I'm losing the name of the playwright.
Yeah,
But
I know this one too, and I also am having trouble remembering his name.
But people in the listening audience there, feel free to look up this book of various one-act plays, because there is a play in there called Philip Glass Buys a Loaf of Bread.
Yes, I read this play. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I lent you the book.
Yeah.
David Ives.
Okay.
That's his name, David Ives. Yeah, so if you find any of these one-act plays by David Ives, I'm probably going to turn this into my nerd corner now.
Sure.
He was the first not incredibly well-known playwright that I ever fell in love with in terms of the way that they did their scripts, because it has a lot to do with language, the way in which we misappropriate the way that we use our language, and how to find romance and self-acceptance in our use of language and how we interact with people. It leans a bit on some of the absurd and some of the styles that you would be used to in sketch comedy, but I would say that at the very least, a good adult party night might be to just hang out with a few people, print off a couple copies of a script, and just do a cold read with each other. I might be alone in that, but that's the kind of thing that I still want to do when we get out of COVID, is have a bunch of people over and do either some David Ives or some Eugene Ionesco.
Yeah, I would be surprised if you could find a group of people to have that adult party with, especially considering I'm over here now in California.
Oh, that's cute that you think I'm referring to you alone.
Not me alone. I just like you. If you know
you would
people,
be the type that would be interested.
If you know people who would do that, that's great. I don't.
I do.
I don't.
Listen, you got to hang out with people in the art scene, or at least bored people that used to go and do theater in high school.
Yeah,
most of the people that I know.
The art scene's tricky because it's the same problem I have with like all my gamer friends. Is like they're too into video games, but then like I have my jock friends that are too not into other weird things that I like. And it's the same with the art thing. Like there are people that are like too arty, too hipstery.
You're probably talking about like Kelly or some of the other ones.
And then there are people that just don't give a shit about anything that isn't like popcorn films. So like I'm like always in the middle of stuff, and like there's no mixture of people like me. It's very unfortunate.
Well, that's why you and I jive so well, my man, is I'm willing to step out of my comfort zone to watch things like some of those horrifying movies. Like the Florida Project.
Oh, I love the Florida Project. So beautiful.
I know you do, and it's so painful for me because I lived a portion of that.
Yeah, but I like so did I. But like, what I like is this sort of non-judgmental view of it. Like the Florida Gundam Wing makes me think of the Florida Project in the way they're trying to depict these characters.
You know, the way that you say that, yeah, I can see where you're going with that. The point is that if you ask people to do a thing and they're willing to step out of their comfy little nest, whether that's them being jocks or arty or whatever, and try something new, it betters them and you get what you're looking for.
Yeah, so, take that advice to heart, audience, and hopefully you can have a fun, wacky adult party with plays or whatever weird thing that you're into. Well, then let's thank Lev Van Rensselaer, being the audio maven that we are craven. But let's thank our co-host this season, Bob Skerry. Bob, what plugs do you have for us?
Oh, I've got too many plugs for you, my friend. Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Skerry VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk headquarters. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other websites by my handle, BobScaryVOA. You can also go to bobscaryvoa.com and listen to my demos and hopefully hire me to do voices for you. I need it, please. And if you're a voice actor who's listening to this, let's be friends. I need to make more voice acting friends. You can also find that I'm a game developer at this point. If you go to Librarian PC, just spell it librarian and PC .itch, like itch and scratch, .io/. niche. And you'll find the standard rules document for a game that myself and my friend, Anthony, who goes by Librarian PC, have created. And pretty soon, a couple weeks after the date of this recording, I should be releasing the first in a series of flavored documents to play niche through. So keep an eye out on his and my itch, and maybe we can talk about it. Play a game sometime.
And
what about you, Scale?
Yeah, and I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, animations, video essays, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com, and presumably social media of a similar-sounding name. Well, Bob, when this episode comes out, it will be New Year, so say Happy New Year to the listeners.
We're done. We've defeated the evil. It's over now.
Just one